Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of the Natural Podcast. I'm here again with Huda. We're going to be talking about toxic people and how to remove them from your life because I think that is something very important to understand and know. So, I want to give you guys some value and do that today. So, we're going to start it off here. A toxic person is just basically a person who brings you down, like is constantly negative, is not a good influence on you. Someone who is just constantly in a negative state. Who do we were talking about it earlier? Someone who usually, has a narcissistic personality. And, you really want to watch out for the type of people that are just like, they don't know that they're toxic, because that can be even worse when someone starts to realize it. Because even myself, I used to be very toxic, but when you don't realize it, it's hard to it's hard to get that person to change. So it's just something you got to really look out for. So we're going to be talking a little bit about today. What are your thoughts, Huda, on what a toxic person is?
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying. I think, especially for those people who don't realize that they're toxic, they have this very self-deprecating kind of lifestyle where they might be in a rut or something, and they might not notice, but they're taking it out on everyone because they're just spiraling, so they don't realize that they're just affecting everyone with that energy. And for the most part, they are displaying narcissistic tendencies, or they happen to be full-blown narcissists themselves. And for personality type, they tend to always convince the other person, that they're to blame for their own issues. They project that kind of blame onto other people. If someone's getting fed up with them, they'll always try to drag them back in with a pity story and like make them feel bad for them, to kind of keep them in that cycle. So yeah, it's a very tricky topic, because I think, especially if someone's not recognizing they're a narcissist, it's very hard for them to change their behavior. And unless they make that realization, I think that's the first step in being able to rehabilitate any kind of narcissistic tendencies they might have.
Yeah, definitely. I think a big thing is like self-awareness, knowing who you are as a person and accepting it, which is really, really hard to do. Because, I mean, think about it. If you're a negative person, you're constantly negative, you don't want to accept that in your head. You want to think that you're, the best person ever, and, this and that. But that's exactly that mentality that makes you not able to change. And I think for me, when I was very toxic, it was coming to a realization. I was kind of in a fantasy land all the time in my head. And for me, it was coming into a realization like, holy crap, like a lot of the things I'm doing is toxic. Like my relationships, I'm making them toxic. So I had to really just like realize who I was and accept it, and that's such something that's just so hard to do. I mean, even I think about my life now, there's so many things that, I know I'm not good at, or I know I do wrong, and it's hard to like accept it. But when you do, there's a magic to that because it helps you able to change. And I think it's very important, like when someone is in that state, you really want to help that person kind of realize it, and you don't want to like tell them, hey, like you're this, you're that. That's the worst thing you can do, because then it feeds that anger and it makes it even worse, and then just spirals. So I think when it comes to like having toxic friends, toxic parents, siblings, whatever, it's good to just kind of lead by example and distance yourself from those type of people. That's the best thing you can really do, unless that person has come to a realization and they understand it. Then there's that steps you can take towards kind of guiding them and helping them if they're willing to seek that advice. But the best thing, in my opinion, is definitely just leading by example. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because a lot of times, with toxic people, they kind of tend to lean on, more empathetic people who are always there to listen to them, who are always there to fix their every problem. And in a sense, those people who are helping these toxic people, they're enabling them in a sense, because if you keep, taking slack for someone, if you keep just, fixing their problems for them, you're not teaching them to be accountable for their actions. You're not teaching them to grow as a person. You're not like allowing them to be able to realize that their behavior is toxic. So I think it's funny because I think there's like a, there's fault on both sides. So if you sense that someone is being toxic in your life, no matter if they're, a significant other or a family member, like you said, sometimes to, not enable them, you do need to distance yourself. That doesn't mean that maybe you can't be there for them at all, but, you need to distance yourself to the extent that you're not allowing their negativity to affect you any longer. You're not letting them have the power over you, to project their issues onto you. And I think the best way, like you said, just lead by example. I think if someone sees someone else, going through obstacles on their own, but still being able to overcome that on their own, they would want to be like, oh, maybe I should be more like that. Maybe I should be, more independent and take accountability for myself. I think it's definitely a good influence to just distance yourself and lead by example.
Yeah, and I know what you're saying. I think enabling is just something a lot of people do, but they don't realize it, I know myself, like a lot of toxic people I had in my life, I would just constantly enable them and I would give in to like the lies and all that stuff. And it's good because like it, in the beginning, obviously you don't realize it, but once you start to realize it, just like, you realize you're a toxic person, you're able to like fix that problem, which is, realizing, okay, this person's trying to manipulate me right now so they can get their way, but is their way a healthy thing for you? It's most of the time, well, almost all the times it's not, so you got to step back and realize like, hey, this person, is trying to manipulate me, so now I can't allow this to happen, because if I enable them, they're going to continue to do it to other people, and not only myself, but other people as well. So it's really just breaking off that enabling and just like distancing yourself from that person and just leading by example. And it's really hard when you're an empathetic person because you feel like you need to help that person. I know you and me, we talk a lot about being empaths and stuff like that, but it's really hard to like do that because you have to be that person that you feel like, oh, you're not being nice to them, but at the same time you're not really being nice to them because you're basically giving them, the ability to think that what they're doing is okay when it's not,
Yeah, and I think, a lot of times when it comes to like getting in the cycle of enabling someone, a lot of times you just kind of want to avoid conflict because, to be real to someone, like, your behavior is not right. Like, I'm not going to like, feed into it. It does lead to conflict. It leads to arguments. And sometimes we think it's easier, like, hey, if we just give in to this toxic person, like just this one last time, we'll help them with this. We keep saying that over and over again, just because we want to help them, but we also don't want to deal with the backlash, of separating ourselves from that person and distancing ourselves, because there will be some kind of backlash as you try to distance yourself from a toxic person. Like, you will get that backlash from that person. They'll be very upset with you. They might try to manipulate you into
Yeah, exactly.
not walking away from them. They could use emotional manipulation. It can be in the form of anger. They can start calling you names, or making it all about like your fault, or they could do more of the pity route, which is like, oh my gosh, I'll have no one left if you walk away from me. Either way, it's going to be a backlash. But I think being strong enough to acknowledge that and just distance yourself is, I think, the first step in being able to possibly help that person by walking away from them.
Yeah, and it's not only helping that person, it's also helping yourself, because by you doing that, you're allowing yourself to be a higher character and, be that influence for them when they're willing to change and more open to it, And I remember myself, like, I was extremely toxic back in the day. Not extremely, but like pretty toxic, I had just a lot of toxic habits. I did a lot of things that, negatively infected the people around me. And it really wasn't until I kind of got out of my like head and phase that and learned self-awareness. And that's one thing I love about meditation, is like it opened me to like a lot of things that helped me realize who I am, and like really thinking like who I am as a person and stuff like that. And so, it's like you said, that not enabling that person, you know, and like hopefully, you know, they're going to get to a point. What happens is, and this is my theory, you know, it's like the universe has like this law, and it's just like, all right, well, you know, you're going to continue being that way, and unless people are feeding that person, you know, enabling them, then they continue to be that way. But it gets to a point where everybody cuts off from them because they don't want that bullshit anymore. And then what happens? They get into, you know, such an intense state of suffering, you know, which is great. I think it's fucking awesome that they get to that state, because that is the point where they change, and that is the point where they realize. And that's what it was for me, is that moment of realization of, holy crap, the way I am right now, like, this is not good at all. Like, this is, you know, and then that finally is like the open to that change. And, you know, and it's not an instant change. It's a change over time, you know, and I'm sure I still have toxic habits. I still do toxic things, but I am a lot more aware of it now, and I can spot it like that, rather than back in the day. It was really hard for me to realize those things, you know? I don't know about you. Have you ever been toxic or something like that?
Yeah, I would say, especially a few years ago, it was like a point in my life when I was just drinking heavily, kind of escaping, you know, my problems, escaping any responsibility. And a lot of that, you know, I did end up hurting a lot of people along the way. I was able to realize it pretty quickly, I think, just because I don't know what it was. It just something in me snapped, you know, right away before I didn't necessarily get to that rock bottom period where everyone kind of like abandoned me. But I did just have that, you know, realization. I don't know, like the, you know, your subconscious in your head that just like, you're not happy what you're doing. Like this path
Yeah,
is,
I don't think everybody needs that level of suffering. You know, I don't mean to cut you out, but I don't think everybody needs that level. But some people, that's all it takes, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. No, I've met some people who I even wonder, like, even if they get to that rock bottom level, do you think that there are just some people who are going to ignore that clarity, that realization, and they'll just, you know, find maybe new people to, you know, kind of leech off their energy? Because I've met some people who are like that, you know, maybe they'll have people abandon them and you would think like this must be their rock bottom, but then, you know, they continue that cycle over and over again, but they just find new people to start manipulating.
Hmm.
You know, that's kind of the thing with like being an idealist. You always want to think that like, you know, everyone can change and everyone will change if they at least hit this certain rock bottom period. Like you would assume that they would have that realization. You know what I mean? I think there are some rare cases where, you know, you have to kind of accept the fact that some people may not change, and you know that kind of goes
Yeah.
back to maybe you can't make amends with that person later on. You know, and it's okay to just kind of cut off someone completely. I think it's very healthy to, you know, kind of assess, you know, the level of toxicness that someone is, and you know, if they, you know, hit that realization and change, that's great. Maybe you can work on amending your relationship, but you also can't be holding your breath for that.
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, waiting for somebody to change is definitely not the way to go about it at all, you know, because that person, you know, it's gonna either take a breakthrough or a hard realization for them. And you know, if you're waiting for that, who knows how long that could take, especially if it's someone really close to you, that's like a sibling or a parent or, you know, significant other. You know, it's really hard to remove a person like that. But you know, once you do it, you know, your life is going to get better, and then maybe theirs might not, but you have to accept that and realize that that's not your fault. That's their own fault, because what you're doing by letting them be that way is enabling them, you know, like you said. And so it's crazy because it's really hard, you know, and it's so funny because I think back and, you know, there was a lot of times where I waited for someone to change and it never happened, and there's a lot of times where it did, you know, and it's really cool when it does happen. And I think it's, you know, it's really awesome when you can reconnect with somebody. And you know, I have someone that comes to the top of my head, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's such an awesome thing when you reconnect with that person, and you know that you can just see that they're a different person, like their habits have changed, and you know they're more, they're not toxic. You know, they feed your energy rather than, you know, leeching from it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the thing is, it's pretty cool because I see that kind of behavior. I'm in a juvenile defense clinic right now, and a lot of times with our clients, we see a lot of repeat offenders, and we always think to ourselves, like, what can we say to this person to change them? If we can get them off on this one charge, will they have that realization? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we kind of this like these ideas go back and forth, and you just never know if it's going to click with them or not. There was one client that we had, which was pretty cool. He had a long list of offenses that he had, but he actually cleaned his life together, and he was one of those clients that we thought was not going to make it, and he actually gave us a phone call, and he has like a full-time job and everything, going back to school and things like that. And it's really cool when those people who do change, come back to you and they tell you the ways that they changed and like what good they're doing in their life now. I think it's really rewarding and refreshing to hear that kind of change. It might not be with everyone, but it definitely is rewarding to hear it when it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I just had a thought, and how you said you're a criminal defense lawyer, and you think a lot of them are very crooked. They don't want to help the person; they just want to help them in the sense that, getting them out of what they're in.
Mhm.
But when we talk, it sounds like obviously you're that person that doesn't enable them in that sense, that wants to help them not get into that situation where they're screwed the rest of their life, but make them say like, "Hey, look, you're doing all this crap, and like if you continue, like this is what's going to happen."
Yeah, exactly. It's a holistic kind of representation. So a lot of times there are, deeper rooted issues with the family dynamic, but at the same time, no matter like, the external issues that are going on with their family or circumstances, I always make it a point to let them know that they do have a level of accountability. They can't blame everything on like, having really shitty parents or, a really, bad upbringing or anything like that, because we all have that level of accountability. So I definitely like to emphasize that to them, like, you're here because you did XYZ. You know what I mean? Like, your mom didn't do that, your dad didn't do that, you want to put blame on them. Okay, they can be blamed for other things, but if you look, directly at it, you need to take accountability for what you directly did.
hmm Yeah, and I think being harsh like that, is a really, sometimes you really got to be that way. You gotta just tell that person straight up, like, look, this is what you're doing, and if you don't change it, like you're just gonna be like that, and that's just gonna happen. You're gonna be screwed, and then when you're all screwed up, and boom, like then you fucking realize you want to change, and then boom, like it's too late at that point because you already messed up so much. But it's never too late. But you're just
It's
gonna make it a lot
yeah.
harder for yourself down the road, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's, you can always plant that seed in someone. So if you give someone advice or, something like that, it might not click. They might fuck up a bunch of times down the road. And at that point, you probably stop talking to them. But at least for me, I've had moments where I would remember advice someone had told me where I didn't listen. I'm like, okay, whatever, like, you don't know anything. And then when I had that realization, like that seed that they planted, like their advice kind of sprung back, um, during my moment of clarity. And like, that's what they meant by this. Like, I can really appreciate their advice now. So, and they planted the seed, even though it might have not led to direct results. I think someone, like, if someone gives you advice, they're not going to change you right away. You have to change yourself. But I think that advice kind of always stays in the back of your head.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I can think back to when I was in that state. There was that points where I wasn't, wanting to listen to that. Like even my mom, I could sit back and think of so many times that she was right. And you know what I'm saying? Like you laugh because you're like, wow, I wish I listened, but you kind of have to go through it. I feel like everybody has to go through that self-realization, unless you were born and raised in a family that understands that and like, is extremely positive and can tell you that from the get-go. You have to kind of just experience it.
Yeah, exactly. You have no idea how many times I've texted my mom, "Oh man, you were right about X, Y, and Z," like down the line, like years later. You just kind of realize that. But I think that's the cool part, like everyone's a teacher in a sense to you. Whether they're still in your life or not, I think they've left their own mark, and they taught you their own lesson. And it's always something that you do keep in the back of your mind. I think that some people can choose to be ignorant. Like I've said before about how some people seem like they'll never change. I never want to say never, but we do see those people where it's like they're just, I don't know what it is, too stubborn, too, closed-minded, where they're not willing to accept that. They're not willing to open up to change. I think if someone's not willing to open up to change, they can never really change.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's pretty much it, that's like, can't really go over more than that, as far as I can think. But yeah, main key things, main takeaway if you're watching this, maybe you are a toxic person and that's okay. That's fine. A lot of people go through that, but have that self-realization, sit down and accept who you are. That's number one. If you're watching this and you're in a toxic relationship, step back and see like, wow, this person really does make me act a certain way that's negative to my character, and then, step number three, whichever one you are, let's say you're the toxic person, start working towards changing that, get around people and be willing to listen to those positive people, rather than, taking and, just being negative towards their character. But give to that person. And, if you're in that toxic relationship, be the example for that person. That's really key takeaways here. So, yep, that's about it. Anything else you got real quick you want to put out there?
No, yeah, exactly. Like key point, just take accountability for your actions. If you're the one who's trying to help someone, don't just tell them what they want to hear to avoid conflict. Like, just be straightforward. Be real with the person. They might not accept what you say right away. That's fine. You planted that seed, and, you can kind of just distance yourself with a clear conscience with that. And, it's up to them to change ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
Protect your energy and, try to do, just try to be real with someone, don't lie to them, don't just agree with them, and, just lead by example, continue to, do good for yourself. And, I think that kind of influence can rub off even at a distance.
Exactly. And I'm going to put one last thing before we go here. If you are listening to this, a little challenge, I want you to remove one toxic person from your life and add a positive person. So I heard this on Gary Vee's podcast, and I'm just going to put it out there because I think a lot of people need to hear it, because I thought it was amazing advice. So find that toxic person, maybe it's a close friend, maybe it's, a sibling or something, maybe it's a cousin you hang out with, and just remove them and add a positive person. Might be someone, you're not crazy about because they're all uppity and happy all the time, but just bring them into your life and see how that can affect your character, But I think that is a key takeaway here as well. Remove that one person, just one. It doesn't have to be all of them, but get that one down and replace it with a positive person. All right, guys, take care. Thank you for watching. Again, you can find me on Facebook, Adrian Lammersdorf, or Instagram's cool too, A Natural Fitness Adrian. Also Huda, you can find her through my Facebook. So just reach out to us if you want more information, or if you need some advice on, removing toxic people. Also, if you're watching this on Facebook, please share. Sharing is caring. Take care, guys. Bye.